Bruce, could you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, Bruce Reid. I am now still coming to terms with saying this, but I'm a former employee of North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, a watch manager. Last station I was based at was Harrogate, and I retired from there end of September last year. So I've actually been retired now for just less than a year.
And one of the things when you were there was you when 9/11 happened, you took a group of colleagues across to New York. Can you just explain what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, basically the rationale behind me actually going to New York was based on actually attending a couple of funerals that had happened. A couple of firefighters had died on two separate incidents in England. I attended their funerals, one in Blaenau in South Wales and another funeral in Stevenage. So I was aware that the fire service actually do recognise those that actually died on duty, and it's a big thing. So when 9/11 happened, obviously I was aware that there was didn't know at the time exactly how many, but I was aware that a lot of firefighters will have been killed when the towers came down. So I made inquiries to our brigade, our headquarters, as to whether or not North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, silly at the time, would actually be notified of any funerals that were taking place in honour of those in New York. And I was told by the then officer at the time, who basically said that it was highly unlikely that North Yorkshire would be notified by New York, and if anything like that in terms of attending any funerals, you're better off checking it out for yourself. So I made some inquiries and got a telephone, found out that New York's headquarters was in Brooklyn. So I made some few inquiries and finally got passed on to an officer from New York Fire Department called Rick Steinberg. Rick's job was actually to coordinate and inform the service as to whose body had been identified, whose funeral it was, where it was taking place, liaise with the family and try to get as many off-duty firefighters to attend the funerals. But the problem was that the funerals, there were so many, there was 343 firefighters that had died. There were so many funerals taking place simultaneously at different parts of the city and different counties surrounding New York, that it was nigh, and also there was a recall to duty for those off-duty firefighters. So there was limited numbers of actual firefighters who were able to actually attend a colleague's funeral, whereas ordinarily if one or two firefighters have been killed, you might get 8,000 off-duty firefighters attending that funeral. And when I finally spoke to Rick, he'd said that he would, if we could get over there, he would be honoured that we came, and it would help the situation. Obviously there was only a handful of us that went, but he suggested that the flights were pass on the information of the flights to him, and for us not to sort out any accommodation, he would arrange for us to stay at one of the fire stations in New York. So I made some inquiries to the fire station I was working at the time, which is Knaresborough Fire Station, and I just made a few calls to some of the crew and just said, look, I'm going over there. Are you coming? This is when I'm going, looking at going next Thursday. And in the finish of 4 hours, that actually went over, made the trip over. Myself, Steve Willey, Phil Wheelhouse and Owen Hines. Basically we flew from London Heathrow, and we were picked up by Rick Steinberg at Kennedy Airport, who took us to a fire station close by to Kennedy Airport, which is in Far Rockaway in Queens. And there the station, the crew were expecting us. They were given the information that we were coming, and we were greeted a little bit to start with that it wasn't like an intrusion, but a bit questioning as to why we'd come from England, and basically virtually invaded on their grief. because every one of them actually knew somebody that had died when the towers came down. Once we got over that, they realised that we were there for genuine reasons. We'd done it off our own back, and it was out of respect, and they embraced us and made us very welcome. And we stayed there for 4 or 5 nights. And
How were the firefighters that you met? Obviously, they come through something completely unprecedented. How did you, apart from you saying that they were slightly sort of standoffish initially to you, how were they generally?
Generally, incredible. And as we were there longer, I think word had got out that to other funerals that we had attended during the period that we were there, we were becoming more sought after as like, you know, they're the guys from England that have come on. Now, I was surprised to how few international firefighters had actually made the trip and attended the funerals. I was, because I'd seen what had happened in England, where you'd get firefighters from all over the country. I expected firefighters from all over the world to actually descend on New York at that time. Yes, there were firefighters from all over America, California and San Francisco, and all different parts of the States had actually come up to do what we'd done. But at the time that we were there, and the funerals that we attended, there wasn't anybody else there was, I think, one guy we saw from London Fire Brigade. But people knew by the time we got to the 3rd and 4th funeral that we attended that they were coming up to us and they said, come back, and we went back to different firehouses and they put on and they took us like made us their family. It was a extremely humbling and honouring thing to do.
How many funerals did you attend then amongst the group that went out?
Yeah, we got there the towers came down on the Tuesday. We flew out when the international flights opened up again because they were all grounded for a bit. So we went out the Thursday after. We went to a funeral at St Pat's Cathedral on the Friday. We went to attend 2 funerals on the Saturday. There was a memorial service at the old Yankee Stadium on the Sunday, and we got invited to that. And then we went to another funeral on the Monday, and then we flew home on the Tuesday.
And have you been in touch with any of the people that you met since you were there?
Yeah, there was one guy in particular. Was a firefighter at the fire station where we first stayed at Far Rockaway. A guy called Gary Robbins. We kept in touch, and he basically came and stayed with me in my house. And I was at the time I was working at Scarborough Fire Station, and he came and did a shift with me at Scarborough. I've subsequently been back and stayed with him a couple of times, and there was from 9/11 there was like a memorial run set up in recognition of one of the firefighters called Stephen Siller. The run is Tunnel to Towers run, and that happens every year, and any money raised for is basically part of this Stephen Siller Foundation. Now, and I've been over and I've done that run a couple of times, and I've stayed with Gary, and he's subsequently, he moved from that fire station in Far Rockaway, and he went to Greenwich in Midtown Manhattan, and I stayed with him there and stayed at the fire station with him there and been to his house now.
And as a fire service then, how have they recovered, losing so many officers, not just for the sheer fact of losing that number, the impact on them as a fire service? Have they talked about how they've actually recovered and got it back to where it is now?
No, I mean at the time, obviously when I was there, it was extremely raw, and we actually went to visit one of the firefighters who actually joined with this Gary Robbins friend. And he was working at one of the firehouses in Midtown Manhattan. His story was that he attended the towers with his crew of 10 others, so there was 11 in total that had gone from his firehouse, and he was the only firefighter that had actually returned. So he'd lost 10 colleagues in space of an hour or so being at work. so obviously for him personally, and a lot of other people, those that did survive, everybody knew somebody, and even multiple people that were friends with personally. So the mental effect that it had on those that were left, it took for years. It probably still haven't got over it now.
And as we sort of come up to the anniversary then, Knaresborough Fire Station then is going to have a minute silence on Saturdays?
Yeah.
Will that just be will that be across North Yorkshire, or just something that Knaresborough has decided to do?
Well, I believe there is something happening from within North Yorkshire Fire Service. I don't know if it's an organised thing that's happening at every fire station, and I think there's obviously we're not been there. I can't comment what I don't know, but basically, as far as I'm aware, there will be. It's up to the stations and the crews at the time, but I do know that Knaresborough are volunteering to come up just around about the time that. Basically in our time, it was just before 1:45 in the afternoon when the first plane hit. So there will be a minute silence around about 1:45 tomorrow, and then I'll be there with the Knaresborough crew.